Now, what this test has done already is it has created a client, found the directory, called the token endpoint of the directory, called the directory to say, give me a software statement, and to answer your question is to see what redirect URLs are supported by the mockbank client. We can have a look at what's been registered in the directory. And in the directory, the SSA contains all of the redirect URLs, so you can use any of these, but in particular, you're probably interested in tpp.localhost.callback, which is the one you probably use. So you can use any of these redirect URLs. Coming back to the certification suite. So we've registered, we've talked to the bank, and we've discovered the bank, we've found the registration endpoint, and we've made a request to the bank to register. And what has the bank responded with? The bank has responded with a client. That's pretty cool. The bank has responded and said, yeah, you're registered. You can now talk to me, and that's great. Does it work? That's the million-dollar question, and that's the real test of dynamic client registration. There's no point registering a client and saying you're done. No, your client has to be usable from the moment you click registration. Now, I'm just going to repeat that test because that would have timed out. But let's go and do that again. So I'm going to talk to the directory. You can see the success count coming up. I'm doing my registration. I've registered to the bank, and now I'm going to pretend to be a new customer, and I'm going to log on. And I'm already logged on to that instance of the directory. I'm going to select those two accounts. I'm going to consent to share my data. I've redirected to my TPP. My TPP is checking my tokens, and voila, I'm done. That's it. That's how open banking should be.
All right, got it. So basically, the TPP has to be calling the directory to register with the bank beforehand in order to be able to get the redirects and everything.
That's correct. You've got it. So when you register to a bank, it's like rocking up with a power of attorney or a signed registration letter. You come to the bank saying, here's my signed registration letter from the directory. And this signed document contains all of the information about your application that you've registered at the directory, but it also contains all of the status about who you are. So this is an entry for Open Banking Brazil. It's registered and accredited by Banco Central. It is a DDoS. It is active. And so the bank is processing all of this information to say, yeah, you are allowed to onboard. Very simple, very straightforward. So that's how the process.
Yeah. And now, that's included in the sample for the TTP Node.js as well. This request.
Not yet. It will be by the end of next week. I've got it done. I just need to check it in. If you ask me, if you send me an email, I can send you some snippets of code that will do that for you.
That got a bit confused for me because I was able to pass the test from the OpenID, but I didn't do this step. So that's the only piece I'm missing, I guess, to be able to use the mockbank right now.
Well, you can use the mockbank using these credentials because the credentials are already on the directory.
Oh, and so probably the issue was I forgot the name, but the thing you showed before that like there's the number 2 and the 3 and the version, but there's like 3 options for like the earn. Let me check the name.
Oh yeah,
but I think I got the issue. You showed before, yeah.
Well, I'll fix the reference TPP, and you'll have an end-to-end example. That'll only take a couple of minutes. But we're not committing to keeping this TPP accurate. Now, saying that, anybody in the community can submit a pull request and improve it. So whilst we're giving this to the community, it would be very good if the community would also give back. There should be no competition in getting access to data. The competition should be in what you want to do with the data. What value propositions are you bringing? Open banking is not about creating new pipes. Open banking is about creating new propositions on standards. It's not meant to create new Uber TPPs. There's no need for them when you've implemented to a consistent standard and you've implemented everything to open standards. And so this is a classic example of how open banking is meant to function, by enabling access to data, not requiring new pipes. Make sense?
Yeah, got it.
Cool.
And just to clarify my last point, I was talking about the ACR values supported.
Yeah, it'll be the ACR values that have got mixed up on that TPP.
Yeah, so I should be sending silver, right? That's the one.
No, I will be sending silver, but you should be sending the ACR value that is published by the bank. So different banks will be publishing different ACR values. The mock bank supports 2 or 3 of them, but there are 2 specific standards for Brazil. So when you discover that metadata for each of the banks, you should be using the ACR, one of the 2 ACRs that the bank says it supports.
The ones that contain Brazil in the name?
Right, the ones that take Brazil in the name.
All right, got it.
Every bank is required to support LOA2. Some banks may support LOA3. It's your choice as a TPP as to which one you ask for.
Got it. Thank you.
Oh, no worries. That wasn't what I was going to touch on today. Brownie, Eric, does somebody want to do an introduction as to the actual purpose of the meeting for functional performance?
Excuse me, Ralph. Ralph?
Yep.
Excuse me. Can you say it again?
Does somebody want to do an introduction to the why we do functional performance and what the goals are and what we're trying to achieve and how it works before I dive into the details, or do you just want me to do it? I'm more than happy either way.
Okay, I'll do in Portuguese very briefly, and you make the additional details. Bom, então o objetivo do motor de conformidade é a gente conseguir garantir que todas as APIs estão sendo implementadas conforme as especificações e manter a padronização, né? Acho que não sei se aqui havia alguma dúvida. Paulo, você ainda está aí?
Sim,
Você quer complementar um pouquinho aqui os objetivos aqui do motor de conformidade?
A gente vai começar a falar da funcional. Eu cheguei a essa minha dúvida só dos fatos, mas tudo bem. Não, o objetivo do funcional é basicamente validar estruturas, regras de campos, a parte de segurança das APIs, né, do FAP, 2 e outros. Acho que o Ralph pode demonstrar todo o processo aí.
Beleza. Okay, Ralph, you can move on.
Okay, so welcome to how to achieve functional performance. It's exceptionally similar to how you achieve security conformance. What we have created and what Braden's been doing is working with the OpenID Foundation to develop both sides of the tests. So we have, in the same way as we were working to create the appropriate security and DCR tests with the OIDF, we have used exactly the same foundation and framework to create a set of functional tests for each of the different APIs. When you log on to the service, you can log on using your directory sandbox accounts. At the moment, we will be adding support for the directory production accounts as well, but it looks exactly the same as you did previously. So what you can do is plug in your details of your client that you would have attained using dynamic client registration. So first step, register with a bank. If you want to, you can prove that that bank is compliant to the security profile that they say that they are. And then you take that client and you add those client details into the tests that you're trying to perform. Now, what we've got is we've gone and created a whole bunch of different functional tests. right at the top, Open Banking Brazil functional tests, and you will run through each of these tests that you think are necessary for your certification cases. So if you're a bank that supports personal accounts only, you obviously wouldn't be running the business account API. You're then going to select the mechanisms that you used when you registered with that bank, and you fill out your certificates, put in your keys, blah, 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 everything that we did said previously. You're going to specify the version number of the API, and this should correspond to the version or the endpoint that you're advertising on the directory to say, this is where my accounts API is. In exactly the same way, you're going to use your consents API, plug in your CPF or your CMPJ that you need to create upfront as part of your consents, and you click Create Test Plan. This is all live and we're making changes. So what we've got here is we've got the first test, which is an account API test, and then we've got an explicit test for the wrong API permissions test, where we explicitly start trying to put in wrong data. Now, it's very important for both TPPs and banks that we have a consistent API. And a consistent API covers both happy path, but also negative path testing, which is just as good. Now, there are a lot of gaps still in the specifications when it comes to negative paths, as in error codes or things that should come back from the authorization server. And there's quite a few new spec work that's going to go into the next iteration of these to standardize more the unhappy and error states. But what we're starting with is some of the basic tests to make sure that banks and in the case of relying parties, TPPs, are correctly handling bad requests to make sure that they're not accidentally leaking more data than the TPPs consented to, and that they respond correctly if you do something stupid like put in an expiry more than 12 months. So let's just do the negative tests. Now, some of these negative tests are relatively new, and this is all live. Now, I'm making no commitments that the mock bank handles all of these, but we shall see. We've gone through, we've created some tests, we've set up a consent, and now we're going to log in with theoretically a bad test. Test. We'll take an endpoint. I'm going to log in again. So I passed my first part, and this time I'm going to log in, get a second time with a different set of permissions. Lots of tests. So here we go. Ensure we cannot call the accounts root API. Call protected resource and expect a failure. I called the expected resource and I got a failure. So this test explicitly goes and is testing to make sure that when I ask for the wrong permissions, I'm denied access to resources. Okay. So if we go back to return to my plan, and I'll run the happy path tests for accounts. This will test to make sure that we can always access the right resources. Same thing. So got some successes, setting up the consent, getting tokens, checking the tokens are correct, that they're all meet all the security requirements for happy path. And I'm going to log in. Same thing. I'm going to select 2 bank accounts that I want to have access to. I'm going to click continue. And the tests start going through and testing all of the APIs. Now, if this is set up correctly, there should be one failure, unless it's been accidentally fixed. Can everybody see the, yeah, there we go. Can everybody see the little test counter continue to carry up? 187, 192, 194, like there's a lot of different test cases. So we got an error and we failed. It's still running, so it's still testing and making, you know, it wasn't a fatal failure. It can carry on testing other things to see what else might have broken, but at the moment it has found one failure case. Okay, it's finished and it's in a failure state, and very nicely I get my summary and I can click on that and it says, right, what was the test? The test was fetch account. So something happened on the fetch account. I got a response, yeah, that was all good, and then it went through and started looking at the structure of the account. So all the different field names, were they there? Let's come back down to our error. So what did happen? Unable to find subtype on account. Let's have a look. And indeed, there is no subtype. Now, subtype is a mandatory element on the account Swagger, and therefore the bank or my mock bank is not spec compliant. And that is a failure of the test case. Therefore, I've failed my performance. I have to go and fix it and then come back and rerun my certification testing suite. Any questions? I just want to use this as a classic example. So I don't know who the unknown user was that put this comment in, but so excuse me while I translate it. I just want to make sure it's the right. That's correct. So let's go and have a look at this question. So somebody has raised and I won't say who, has raised a question over the marital status additional field. And somebody's got some notes somewhere that said it should be filled in even though it's an optional field, and the type's enum was not running through even though there was a null value. So we've got a ticket outstanding, and we'll go through this, how we validate each of these issues, because it's a really good example on how we go through the triage process should you find something that you don't agree with. So in this case, it was a ticket that was raised. Here was the details. I'll try and hide the person. We received annotations, natural person relationship, blah, 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 blah. We received a note in the natural person's identification validated, unable to find marital status additional info on the natural person identity API response. As we verified, we are responding marital status additional info null. So let's go and look at what this means for when we triage these issues. It says this is an optional field and being filled in is as null. Well, let's check. So based on the Swagger, which is the golden source for all things in the test suite and all things in open banking, if you look for that field, you'll see that marital status additional info is not marked as optional. In addition, it's explicitly a regex pattern of white space and any character, something that is not not null. And in addition, when you start looking at what it actually means to support a null in Swagger, a null has a very specific type, and the null must be marked as nullable equals true. So if you want to be able to support, or if the Swagger says that you're supposed to support a null value in a specification, then the Swagger needs to be updated to reflect that status. So marital status additional info is not currently nullable under the definitions of the Swagger specification. And that means it is a fail if you use a null value on that request. Now, if you'd like to change that, you're not talking to us, you're talking to the functional API team. You can raise a specifications bug and you can follow it up with the specifications team. But all of these nulls, where they're not nulls, will fail the Swagger validation, which means they fail the conformance suite validation. It's pretty black and white. Now, wherever it's not black and white, Miro or the central authority doing testing may decide to give a conditional pass. But in the case of something where it is explicitly called out in the Swagger, it would be very hard to justify people not following it from a different reason, because I understand the point that's being made, but nullable is set on other properties. It's not set on marital status additional info. So coming back to the conformance certification suite, any questions on anything I've shown so far? No one? Nothing?
I think there is a question here in the chat.
Yep.
Thales, Ralph, please to obtain functional certification, we must submit all APIs to conformance testing, or we can run the tests only with the API customers.
So when you are required, as I understand it, under the legislation to certify your APIs. That means that you need to certify any of the APIs that you support. So if we go back to editor configuration, if you support only personal customers, you would only have to obviously submit personal customers. If you support business customers, you'd have to support business customers. Which APIs you support is up to you. That's different business models, different characteristics, but whatever business model you support or whatever APIs you support, the expectation is you support all of the API. So I don't know if that answers your question. The other thing is, this is self-certification. So when you run this pack, this creates green. There is no way for Radium to know if you are meant to certify all of the APIs, one of the APIs, none of the APIs. That's you making that attestation that you have done what you need to do. Now, I would expect that most banks will need to certify every one of these APIs, except maybe for those that don't support business accounts. Does that make sense, Talis?
Perfect. Thank you, Ralph.
More than welcome. So now we're going to run the credit card API, and I'll hopefully this one I don't have an error in. So looking at the form and the credit card endpoints. Does anyone know what it is off the top of their heads? No. Oh, let's do resources. Why not? Thank you, Frederico. So this time I'm going to point at the root of my credit card account to V1 accounts. I'm going to run a test plan, run my test. It's going to go away, set up a credit card's consent. So let's look at the consent. It's going to, oh, I've got an error. So straight away I failed, unauthorized. Please. Wrong credit card. remember, you may have to remember to make sure that you save your configuration for every one of the APIs, because your client will be registered with one token endpoint mechanism. So now I'm through the consent phase. I've created a consent called states. I pushed an authorization, and now I'm going to log on and give consent to the credit card. So as you can see, I've got my credit card information. I'm going to consent to all the credit card stuff. I'm going to give permission to that credit card account. And it's testing all the credit card API data. It's going through and testing my credit card list, my brand name, my all the same thing, one by one, and I've already got a failure. So I've got an issue with a product additional info doesn't match the required pattern on the credit card API response. I've got a hard failure and a 403 forbidden. So I've got a failed test. Again, on this example, here's some example failures. You can go and look at those at your leisure. But it's the same process that you go through each of these different APIs. Let's see if we've got one still. Let's do, I'm going to redo counts, and I'll do, no, let's do mistakes. Resources, let's do resources. Job, push, happy, log on, consent access to my resources. Lots and lots and lots of resources tests. Now, for those of you that are going to have to run testing, good news is that the program supports Selenium really well, and there's examples of how to drive this in an entirely headless fashion. So for those groups that are looking to go and automate all of this, you can also use access tokens to be able to go and drive all of the different tests. So there's a fully fledged API for this, which gives you the ability to hook this into your CI/CD and development pipelines as well. So there's really no excuses for releasing APIs that don't pass functional conformance. There's also no reason to go and stand up an army of testers, because you can hook this into all of your automation processes, which is what I would very much strongly recommend. So now we've finished, and I've got a pass, and everything's good, and I've got my logs, and I've looked at it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to return to my plan, and I'm going to create a certification package. Now, when you create a certification package, you've got to remember that everything that you do is public, and everything is available for public scrutiny. So I'm going to click my certification package. I'm going to upload two files. These are not the OpenID Foundation certifications. They are the Open Banking Brazil functional certification terms and conditions. Eric, are you on the call? I'm not sure if they've been communicated yet to the ecosystem, but if they haven't been, they will be shortly. Rowney, do you know if they've been published yet?
No, Ralph. I'll check with Eric here.
Okay, cool. So you simply upload your certification document. This is basically a confirmation that you've read the terms and conditions, and terms and conditions basically say, this is self-certification, I have done this correctly, these are the terms, if you found to lie, I understand that you can take my results off. We understand that it's that it's public, etc., etc., etc. And you double click on one of those and you upload that file. The next thing is the scary one, your certification of conformance. Now, this is not a certificate that we issue. This is a certificate that you issue. On this certificate is going to be these details, are very similar. Who are you? What are you certifying? What particular profile are you certifying? What version of the suite did you use and what date? And then on here, you make some attestations. You basically say, I have not lied. I have used a good implementation. I have not made fake data. I have not hacked my system to pass. I have done everything that I need in order to create a safe, secure, functionally conformant API. And then it needs to be signed. And who it needs to be signed with is I'm not sure, because that's inside the Sandbox team in Miro. But typically, it's signed by whoever did it, i.e. me, when I ran that test, but also who is accountable. So usually you have two signatures, and in the UK, you have the person that ran the program, and then you have the accountable senior executive who takes full responsibility to the central bank that they have confirmed that the bank has done the right thing, to their best of their knowledge, have done the right thing. There's some additional information at the bottom that allows you to say whatever, if you want to provide information about how what did you do, how does it work, what else do you offer, but it's entirely optional in terms of other stuff that you provide. So we're going to upload one of
the open banking versions of those files in Portuguese have been released. They are on the GitHub.
We'll get to that in a second. Cool. So in this conformance document, you have the equivalent of that's the program terms and conditions. So your environment, what you're signing up to, who signed it, who's asserted, very, very similar, translated into Portuguese, and I assume you've got the other one for the terms of conditions for Open Banking Brazil functional conformance. There you go. So you can take both of those, sign them, and update them and upload them into the certification testing suite. Now I've lost the tab. That one. So once you've done those, or uploaded those two documents, you click prepare certification package, and I've been logged out. This is the curse of live demos, because we've just done a release, it looks like. Yep. Yeah, 1 minute ago. Cool, that'll be back up in a minute, but in the meantime, what I will do is I'll switch to the same package and the same approach on the certification, the OIDF pack. And if we look at published results, and we look at one I published, we did a little while ago. There we go. When you've completed that certification package, your results are made public, so anyone can have access to this this public link. You download the package, which will be just a zip file. I'll show you what that looks like. It's a we'll download a service type. You go on mute. You'll download a test log that looks like this. It's a zip file. Inside the zip file is a copy, a HTML page, and it's an extract of your test results. It's got all of the stuff that was used to run that test. It's got all of the results of that test. It's got, and most importantly, they've each got a signature file. So that shows that signature was signed by the testing harness, and that means that you can always correlate to make sure that this test pack was done on the correct server. It was done on the correct, with the correct deployment, with the correct key. In addition, you will always be able to link to this plan ID on the public on the server. This is not going to work very well. Where you will always have a link back to the test plan on the server. So you can always go and explore that. You can look at the logs, you can download logs, you can go and explore in detail an individual's certification package. Okay. Now I'd like to hand over to somebody from Miro who can walk through how to upload the certification package to the service desk, if that's at all possible, Rowney. No? Is there anyone from the service desk that will be able to demonstrate how that works?
Hey, Rolf, I'll check here if we can bring someone to demonstrate this part of the process.
So there was a question from Raoul about the signing process. So what you had in this example test log were these two signature documents. Now this is not something you create. This is something the test shell will create when you download your certification package. And these signed documents are signed by the directory saying this came from signed by the test shell, saying this was signed by the test shell, executed on the test shell, done. And we can confirm that this HTML page has not been tampered with or changed, which is quite important so that people can review everybody's logs with confidence. In terms of signing the PDF, again, that's a policy question for Miro. The OpenID Foundation takes both digital signatures and wet signatures in a scanned copy on those PDFs. I don't know what has been set by the Sandbox squad. So what Rowney's now trying to do is find someone that can walk you through the client view of how you submit your certification package. But broadly, you log on to the service desk, so the Open Banking Brazil service desk, and you create a ticket type, which is a request for certification. Inside that certification ticket type will be, what are you certifying, which comments, which flavors, please upload your zip file. And when you've uploaded that zip file, it will go through into a workflow. Now the workflow is relatively straightforward. The workflow is going to validate that you're all green. It will validate that the test shell that you ran was accurate. It will validate that it was ran on a relatively new version. You'll validate that it was run on the actual server and not on your local host, and it will validate that the document was signed by an appropriately authorized individual, so an accountable executive. At that point, the documents will then be, in terms of publication, everybody's results will be added to the
Ralph?
Yeah.
After you finish, Eric can present how to do this final step.
in addition to the conformance, you'll end up with an entry on the conformance table. Now, this is a markdown table. Brazil will be, I believe, the website team will be processing this table and to put it into a nicer, prettier, more colorful version than this. But in the similar vein to the OpenID Foundation's structure, you will have the name of the organization, the particular sub-brand that you use to run, a link to the conformance results, a view of the HTML document, sorry, a link to the download, which will be stored inside Git, and then an overall result. And you will submit an individual result for whatever one of these APIs that you think that you need to submit for. Okay. Now this is going to be rechanged to the particular version, so it'll be version 1.0.0 in terms of those submissions, and as new versions are published, we will start certifying to different functional specifications. And in the same way as you got for the OIDF, you will end up with more and more tables of who's certified what, where, and why. In terms of discovery, this information will be reflected onto the directory. So the directory will also provide a means to APIs and via API to TPPs to be able to confirm or to be able to make sure that they're only interacting with versions of APIs that have been certified if they choose to. So for example, it's possible for a bank to release version 2 of a specific specification, but not necessarily a complete certification of that API. It is therefore very important that TPPs have a way of deciding, do they want to interact with version 1 of an API which is certified, or do they want to use version 2 which might have more functionality but has not yet been certified, which means it may have issues. So we're going to add that discovery metadata and the discovery information to the directory so that you can programmatically determine which versions of APIs do you want to interact with, either certified or uncertified versions. And I think that is it.
So I would just take the opportunity here, Ralph, to show the flow on the service desk side, if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all, Eric. Over to you, mate.
Ok. Pessoal, vou trocar para o português, que acho que é mais fácil. Então, o Ralph me demonstrou aqui a geração do log e do zip. Eu só vou passar aqui pelo processo dentro do Service Desk mesmo. Tudo bem? Compartilhar minha tela. Então, basicamente, página inicial do Service Desk, você vai ter que se logar no... Você vai ter que ser um utilizador logado para conseguir fazer essa submissão. Dependendo do tipo de usuário que você tem, você pode cair nessa página do dashboard ou não. Caso, se você for um N2 de alguma instituição, você vai ter essa página. Então, na abertura de chamadas... Eita. Tá carregando? Perfeito. Você vai ter, então, determinados tipos de chamadas que você pode abrir nessa página. Você vai na categoria enviar pedido de certificação. Novamente, enviar pedido de certificação. E ele vai abrir a página do chamado, que é enviar a solicitação. Aqui você tem o título, que seria meio que linha com o que você está implementando. A gente está em curso de adicionar um descritivo para ficar mais claro, mas o título seria qual instituição e qual o nome da implementação que está sendo certificada, bem semelhante ao OpenID Foundation. A descrição, caso tenha alguma informação adicional que seja importante passar para o pessoal que vai fazer essa validação. O resultado do teste, também semelhante ao OpenID Foundation, então todos foram bem-sucedidos, alguns mal-sucedidos e mal-sucedidos com o detalhamento na descrição. E qual foi o teste que foi executado? Então, como o Ralph demonstrou, a gente está validando por família aqui, ou melhor, por API. Então, qual API está sendo objeto de validação? Lembrando que para T0 a gente vai estar trabalhando com resources, recursos, consentimento e dados cadastrais. E, por fim, o anexo. E o anexo é literalmente aquele zip que ele demonstrou, que contém o log dos resultados, o termo de adesão e o certificado assinado por um dos representantes da instituição. Não sei se ele chegou a entrar no detalhe. Os documentos, a gente vai deixar referenciado aqui também nessa página o acesso aos documentos e nos nossos guias. Perdão. Então, você tem dois termos, tem os termos de condição, que não precisa de nenhuma assinatura, e o certificado de conformidade funcional. Esse sim precisa ser assinado. Ele é semelhante ao da OpenEd Foundation, apenas adequada à legislação brasileira. Não precisa de reconhecimento de firma para assinatura desse certificado. Uma assinatura simples basta, ou seja, tanto uma assinatura digital quanto a impressão do documento e a assinatura. E a gente está requisitando que seja assinado por um dos diretores autorizados pelo Banco Central. Então, normalmente os diretores estatutários aqui. O que a gente usa para a conferência é a API do Banco Central que está descrita aqui nessa página. É a composição do grupo estatutário. Só que nesse caso a gente não está pedindo a gente pede pelo menos uma assinatura desses diretores estatutários, não? João?
Algumas dúvidas rápidas aí, Eric. Uma delas, eu vi aí, eu estava lendo justamente esse documento que você está projetando, esse README aí.
Uhum.
Se você puder dar um exemplo, como é que usa essa API do Banco Central, que eu tentei usar aqui de diversas formas e não consegui, até para saber, né, como é que está esse cadastro aí, quem que eu vou precisar contactar aqui na minha empresa para fazer essa assinatura. E a outra dúvida é, eu preciso ter um PDF assinado por API que eu vou testar?
Não. Então, você pode anexar o mesmo PDF para todas as APIs. Se você for olhar no nosso termo,
Uhum.
a gente está supondo que é a mesma versão do motor. Mas a gente não tem descrição de qual API que está sendo certificada nesse caso.
Tem aí, ó, nome e versão do software ou serviço, API.
Ô, Eric, inicialmente a gente estava pensando em um documento por API sim, tá? Mas eu acho que talvez valha abrir espaço para um conjunto, né? Vou certificar esse conjunto de APIs. É que o teste, ele é feito por API, né? Eu posso testar só a API de consents, pedir a certificação dela e não fazer as demais. Então, aqui, inicialmente estava previsto um documento por API. A gente pode, talvez, pensar nisso.
Eu acho que vale.
Facilita, tá? Porque, assim, como a gente precisa da assinatura, né, de diretor e tudo mais, nem sempre a agenda dessas pessoas é tão simples assim e as coisas podem acontecer em momentos distintos, enfim. Se puder ser um documento só, eu acho que facilita. E ainda assim, aí para o final do documento eu fiquei em dúvida. Assim, tem uns quadrinhos lá com... Se você puder ir até o final do documento... Obrigado. Aí esse contato primário e contato secundário, aí não é quem está assinando, aí são os contatos do Open Banking mesmo.
Exatamente. Então, seria uma pessoa que seria capaz de dar mais detalhes em relação ao que foi certificado.
Tá, é necessariamente contato técnico ou tem que ser um contato de negócio? Porque eu acho que lá no diretório tem essa distinção, né?
Não, a gente não chegou a discutir exatamente isso, mas eu acho que o pensamento é amplo aqui. Se a gente encontrar algum problema na certificação, a gente vai ter que entrar em contato com alguém. Quem seria essa pessoa? Então...
Tá bom.
É a pessoa que pode dar encaminhamento, né? Em casos de dúvidas da RAID, na hora de certificar, precisa tirar alguma dúvida, ou precisa bater um papo, quem que é essa pessoa, né? Não precisa ser o cara que vai resolver, mas quem vai dar o encaminhamento.
Tá bom.
Sobre esse outro pedido, João, a gente acho que vale complementar aqui a documentação desse README. Com o exemplo de implementação, a API, faltou a documentação aqui referente ao Banco Central, mas vou dar um exemplo de uso. até pelo próprio browser. Ela basicamente é uma API que aceita o campo CNPJ, e esse campo, o campo CNPJ seria o código ISPB da instituição, que são 8 dígitos. Então, usando aqui do Banco Central, que são... Pelo próprio browser eu consigo executar, né? E ele retorna a lista dos diretores estatutários. E essa é a conferência que a gente faz.
Excelente. Você pode fazer a gentileza de copiar essa URL aí de exemplo no chat, só para a gente ter como referência?
Claro. Eu vou adicionar também na documentação aqui do Readme na hora, mas já mando para vocês.
Tá bom. Eu tinha uma outra dúvida. Talvez eu esteja falando no workshop errado, tá? Mas em algum momento até o Ralph mostrou aí, a gente tem como acompanhar lá na página do OpenID as implementações que já estão sendo certificadas, né, na parte do FAP. E aí, você nessa lista, na verdade, é uma tabela e você tem vários perfis lá que você pode testar. Tem o DCR, aí tem o Advanced com MTLS, com Private Key e tal. Para a gente ter a certificação suficiente, né? Eu preciso me certificar em todas aquelas colunas ou basta o DCR e uma do Advanced?
Perfeito. Vou puxar aqui essa página. A gente responde essa pergunta, eu vou trazer a resposta da pergunta de ontem.
Perfeito.
Você consegue abrir a tabela? Essa é a tabela em questão que você estava comentando, correto?
Isso aí.
O que acontece? No padrão do Open Banking Brasil, no perfil, no caso, a gente tem que o JARM ele é opcional. Então, é necessário pelo menos uma das 4 combinações aqui das primeiras colunas. Então, MTLS, Private Key, MTLS par, Private Key par, ou seja, uma das 4 e o DCR. Então, por exemplo, essa instituição, o Banco Bradesco aqui estaria certificado, o Santander também, o Votorantim e o Banrisul. Mesmo não sendo o mesmo tipo de certificação. Se por acaso algum deles tivesse sido só um do JARM, ele não seria suficiente nesse caso.
Tá legal. Perfeito. Obrigado.
Nada. Aí, sobre a submissão do processo de certificação que eu tinha para vocês, era isso, pessoal. Se vocês têm dúvidas adicionais,
Vai ficar disponível a gravação, Eric, depois?
Sim. Tanto a de ontem quanto a de hoje a gente disponibiliza no nosso canal do YouTube. O que você está fazendo aí, Nelson?
O canal do YouTube?
Como?
Qual canal do YouTube está disponível?
Deixa eu ver se eu consigo pegar o link fácil para você aqui. A gente referencia ele algumas vezes na nossa página do GitHub também, no portal do desenvolvedor.
Eric, sobre a certificação ali, que você mostrou a figura de algumas instituições que já estão validadas, tem algumas instituições que estão com a data de ontem. Qual que é o tempo médio para a avaliação desse certificado?
O prazo que consta no site da OpenAid Foundation é de 4 dias para a emissão do certificado após submissão, mas a gente tem histórico de 2 dias. Então, eu sei que a submissão do Bradesco foi feita na segunda-feira no final do dia, e aí foi disponibilizado hoje. Essa pergunta é um pouco complexa porque depende de volume. Então, o que a gente tinha recebido de retorno do OpenID é que pedidos até o dia 5 seriam disponibilizados até no máximo dia 15. Todos os outros poderiam ir para datas posteriores.
O prazo padrão da OpenID são 4 dias, tá? Mas dependendo da fila, isso pode demorar mais, né? Como é um volume grande de instituições certificando, na verdade, acho que são 26 instituições e 44 certificações. Então, se todo mundo deixar para o último dia, não vai conseguir fazer, obviamente. Né? Por isso que é importante distribuir no tempo aí. A data do dia 5 era uma garantia que todo mundo ia estar certificado no dia 15.
O pessoal, boa tarde, né? Eu não peguei o começo, o início, né, da reunião, mas para mim não ficou claro como que eu inicio, né? Uma vez que eu tenho lá o teste no Conformance Suite do DCR ou do FAP-RW, como eu faço para iniciar essa submissão? Né? Como que eu submeto? É pela própria ferramenta do Conformance Suite? É via chamado?
Pelo Service Desk, tá? Tem uma
Service
página.
Desk.
Isso. Tá aí.
Pelo Service Desk do Payment.
Beleza. Então eu vou fazer o download dos logs, né, no Conformance Suite. Vou abrir a solicitação no Service Desk e colocar os logs lá, né, em anexo na solicitação, né?
Eu peguei que a gente tinha a geração do zip no próprio motor de conformidade.
Isso mesmo, né? Você extrai o zip, né? Você faz o download de todos os arquivos pelo próprio motor, tá? Eu tenho 2 termos ali também e sobe tudo. Acho que o Eric demonstrou na reunião, acho que depois pode assistir a gravação com detalhes, tá? Mas basicamente, você baixa o zip, tem os termos para assinar, né? Que tem que ser um diretor estatutário, um outro só dando ok e subir tudo aí e colocar o chamado, tá?
Perfeito. Uma outra pergunta, a gente pode... eles devem ser enviados separadamente, né? O FAP-RW e o DCR, ou envia tudo de uma vez?
Tá, desculpa aqui, tá? Aqui essa tela de Service Desk é para certificação funcional, tá?
Perfeito.
Quando a gente fala do FAP, RW e DCR, daí segue os caminhos do Open Foundation, né?
Por quê?
Perfeito. Que aí essa documentação aqui cobre, né?
Exato. Tá. Tem um link, acho que no site, que demonstra certinho qual caminho, qual é o lugar que você abre o chamado. E eu acho que, eu não tenho certeza, acho que quando você clica, acho que tem um botão que já te encaminha para fazer o chamado, tá? É algo mais redondinho, tá? Mas a pergunta se eu posso fazer DCR antes e depois fazer o FAP, talvez seja bom a gente confirmar com o Ralph se funcionaria. Eu acredito que sim, tá? Mas não sei se teria algum impacto. Ralph, one question. When I'm obtaining my security certification, can I do the DCR certification first and then ask for the FAP certification, or I have to do both at the same time?
No, in fact, you can do DCR first. If you look on the website, you'll see the OpenID Foundation has already certified a couple of people for DCR. As in DCR only.
Ok, thank you. Então, respondido. Pode se o seu DCR está pronto, mas ainda está com algum ajuste no FAP, você pode adiantar já o pedido de certificação do DCR. E seria bom pedir já, né? Para desafogar as filas, né? Já vai.
Sim. Além de desafogar as filas, né? A gente faz o caminho da certificação e entende como acontece esse caminho, né? Até que o nosso FAP fique pronto, né? Quando ele ficar pronto, a gente já sabe certinho como fazer e aí é mais rápido, né? Também. Tá certo, muito obrigado. Thanks, Ralph.
No worries.
Eu não estou conseguindo ver. Tem alguém com mais alguma dúvida? Acho que pode ser certificação funcional ou se tiver alguma de segurança também. Aproveitar que está o Ralph aqui. O Rani, eu não estou conseguindo ver quem levantou a mão. Se puder, ou quem levantou, pode falar, por favor.
O Felipe Afonso, da Uniprime. Felipe?
Felipe?
Opa,
Boa tarde. Quando a gente vai mandar os documentos lá no Service Desk, lá tá por família, né, para abrir o ticket. A gente vai ter que abrir um ticket para cada família? Porque lá a gente tem que indicar, né, qual é a família que a gente está certificando, na certificação funcional, no caso, né?
Sim, tá. Inicialmente foi o que a gente desenhou, né? Uma certificação por API. A certificação é por API, então uma por vez, né? Mas isso a gente pode discutir se teria tempo para mudar isso, tá? O problema, acho que é operacionalizar essa mudança, né? Mas a gente pode discutir dentro do squad de sandbox, tá? Mas por enquanto, sim, tá? É uma certificação por família de API, por API. Então significa também um termo por API no momento.
Tá bom, então. Obrigado.
Mais alguma dúvida, pessoal? Bom, Rony, então acho que a gente pode encerrar. Agradecer a presença de todos. Acho que a gente tem canais abertos, tá? O Service Desk para fazer questionamentos de certificação. Se tiver dúvidas sobre a OpenID Foundation, da certificação da OpenID Foundation, pode ser feito pelo Service Desk e eles encaminham para a OpenID Foundation. Ou se quiser agilizar, pode fazer diretamente para a OpenID Foundation, tá? E qualquer problema, tragam para o grupo, tá? Porque o problema de um pode ser problema dos outros também e agiliza a resolver. Agradecer a presença de todos. Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, team, everyone for being here. If anyone send more questions for us, we will send it for you.
You're more than welcome, and best of luck with the programs.
Obrigado, pessoal. Uma boa tarde.
Boa tarde, pessoal.